The Omega Maid fell asleep beneath the Alpha King's throne, and the entire pack thought it was funny. Clara Whitmore had not meant to close her eyes. She had only leaned against the cold marble wall behind the black velvet curtain for one breath, just one, with a silver tray still balanced against her knees and a damp cleaning cloth twisted in her fingers. But exhaustion did not ask permission. It slipped over her like winter fog, heavy and silent, pulling her down until her cheek rested against the polished floor, only a few feet from the royal dais. Beyond the curtain, the moon tribute banquet glittered like a dream meant for everyone except her. Crystal chandeliers burned with hundreds of candles. White roses climbed the stone pillars. Music drifted from the balcony in soft, elegant waves, while high-ranking wolves laughed behind gold-rimmed glasses and spoke of bloodlines, alliances, and who would be worthy enough to stand beside Alpha King Adrian Blackwood. Clara heard none of it now. For the first time in 3 days, her body had simply stopped obeying her. Her pale hands were red from scrubbing. Her brown hair had slipped loose from its pins. The gray maid's dress she wore smelled faintly of soap, smoke, and the rain she had crossed before dawn to bring medicine to her younger brother in the palace infirmary. She was not lazy. She was not careless. She was just tired in a world where Omegas were never allowed to be tired. A sharp laugh cuts through the music, then another. The curtain above her was suddenly ripped aside, and cold light spilled over her face. Clara stirred, confused, her blue-gray eyes fluttering open to 100 staring faces. For one breath, nobody moved. Then the laughter came down like stones. Derek Halloway, captain of the lower guard, stood above her with a cruel smile and one hand still gripping the curtain. "Look at this," he called across the hall. The palace honors the Alpha King, while his little Omega Maid takes a nap under his throne. More laughter rolled through the room. Someone covered a smile behind a fan. Someone else whispered, "Sleeping dog." Clara pushed herself up too fast, dizziness flashing white behind her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but her voice was swallowed by the crowd. Her knees hit the floor again. The tray slipped from her hand, spinning once across the marble before falling still. Heat rushed to her face, not from pride, because pride had been beaten quietly in her long ago, but from fear. If she loses this position, Caleb will lose his bed in the infirmary. If Caleb lost his bed, the fever would take him somewhere. Clara couldn't follow. Across the hall, Lady Marissa Vale watched with a perfect smile, her silver gown shining brighter than the moonlight outside. She had wanted the room to look at Clara. She had wanted the king to see the lowest thing in his palace before choosing the highest woman for his throne. Derek bent closer, his voice softer now, sharper because of it. "Wake up, maid. Royalty is considered." Clara tried to stand again, but the world tilted. And that was when the music stopped. Not stopped. Every candle in the hall leaned as if a storm had entered, though no door had opened. Clara felt it before she saw him, a presence dark and still at the edge of the dais. They were not on the nobles, not on the gold. Clara couldn't look away from him. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood stood at the foot of the dais in a long black coat trimmed with silver thread, still as a shadow carved from stone. The room seemed to shrink around him. Every proud alpha lowered his gaze. Every jeweled hand stilled around every crystal glass. Even Lady Marissa Vale, who had spent the evening glowing beneath every chandelier as if the moon had been made for her alone, forgot how to smile. Clara wished she could disappear back behind the curtain, back into the narrow servant passages where no one cared if her shoes were worn thin or if her hands shook from hunger and fevered worry. But there was no hiding now. The entire hall had seen her on the floor. The entire pack had heard Derek call her a disgrace. She pressed both palms to the marble and forced herself upright, though her arms trembled beneath her weight. The cold floor had left a red mark along her cheek. Her apron was wrinkled. A loose strand of brown hair clung to her damp temple. She must have looked exactly like what they believed she was. A careless Omega maid who had forgotten her place during the most important night of the season. They did not know she had polished those marble steps until after midnight. They didn't know she had carried clean linens through 4 flights of back stairs before sunrise, then scrubbed soot from the kitchen hearths while the royal cooks argued over honey cakes and roasted pears. They didn't know about Caleb. The thought of her brother tightened something behind her ribs. Caleb was only 14, all pale lashes and stubborn hope, tucked beneath a wool blanket in the far corner of the palace infirmary, where the windows were never fully closed. 3 nights ago, when Clara had brought him broth, he had tried to smile through chattering teeth and told her he was almost better. She had smiled back because that was what older sisters did when the truth was too heavy for a child to carry. Then she had traded her supper for fever medicine and promised the healer she would work extra shifts until the debt was paid. So she had worked, tray after tray, bucket after bucket, hall after hall. By the time the banquet began, her feet felt numb inside her black servant shoes, and every candle flame looked like a small floating star she wanted to follow into sleep. But she had stayed awake until the last possible moment. She had stayed awake until her body betrayed her. "Answer him," Derek snapped, stepping closer, though his voice had lost some of its strength beneath the king's silence. Clara lowered her head. "I am sorry, Your Majesty," she said, each word careful, soft, and ashamed. "It will not happen again." A few guests laughed under their breath, waiting for the king to dismiss her, punish her, or order her dragged from sight. Clara waited too. She had learned that mercy rarely walked into rooms like this. But Adrian didn't look away. His silver eyes moved from the red marks on her hands to the faint sway of her body, then to the untouched plate of servant bread half hidden near the curtain. Something in his expression changed, so slight that only Clara felt it. The air turned colder, not cruel, protective. Lady Marissa Vale noticed the change before anyone else did, and fear flashed behind her perfect eyes. It was gone quickly, covered by a graceful step forward and a polished smile for royal attention. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice sweet enough to make every insult sound like a prayer. "Please forgive the disturbance. The servants have been overwhelmed preparing for your banquet. Some of them forget that honor requires discipline." Clara kept her head bowed, but the words found every tender place inside her. Discipline. As if she had not counted every hour of work on aching fingers. As if she had not walked the servant stairs until her legs trembled. As if she had not folded herself smaller and smaller so the palace could pretend Omegas had no pain at all. Around the hall, the nobles murmured in agreement. It was easier to blame a tired maid than question a system that keeps its silver floors shining, while the hands that clean them cracked from cold water and soap. Derek seemed to gain courage from Marissa's voice. He straightened. adjusted the dark collar of his guard uniform as though he was restoring order instead of feeding cruelty. "Lady Marissa is correct, Your Majesty. I found her asleep during the tribute ceremony. A poor example for the palace. I can have her removed before the formal presentation begins." Removed? The word struck Clara harder than laughter. She thought of Caleb in the infirmary, his small hand curled around the edge of his blanket, his voice thin but hopeful when he asked if she would come back before morning. She had promised him she would. She had promised. Because promises were the only wealth she had left. If they send her away, the healer will lose patience. The medicine will stop. The bed would be given to someone whose family had coins, status, a name that mattered. Clara lifted her eyes just enough to see the hem of Adrian's coat, black against the white marble. He had not answered. That silence stretched through the hall until even the candles seemed to burn more quietly. Then Marissa moved closer to Clara, improving her voice but not enough to hide it from the listening crowd. "Stand up properly. At least let His Majesty see that you can obey simple instructions." Clara tried. She pressed one hand to the floor and pushed herself up. Her vision swam, the chandeliers breaking into rings of light above her. For one terrible second, she thought she would fall again. A ripple of amusement traveled through the guests. Someone whispered that omegas were delicate by nature. Someone else said servants should be grateful for any roof over their heads. Clara heard all of it. She also heard the deep, steady sound of Adrian's breath. It didn't quicken. It didn't shake. It waited. Derek stepped beside her and reached for the fallen tray. Not to help, to lift it in front of the room like evidence. "This is what she dropped," he said, smiling toward the nobles. "A servant who cannot carry a tray should not stand near a king." Clara reached for it too, desperate to take back even that small failure. Her fingers closed around the tray's edge at the same moment Derek pulled it away. The motion made her stumble, and a crystal glass rolled from the tray, tapping slightly across the marble until it stopped at Adrian's boot. The sound was tiny. The reaction was not. Adrian looked down at the glass, then at Clara's shaking hand, then at Derek. For the first time that night, the Alpha King spoke. "Tell me," he said quietly, "is this banquet meant to honor strength or to entertain cowards?" The question landed softly, yet it emptied the room of breath. Derek's smile disappeared first. Then the murmurs thinned until even the musicians on the balcony held their bows above the strings, afraid to lower them. Clara stood between the fallen curtain and the royal dais, swaying beneath the weight of attention she had never wanted. She wanted to apologize again. She wanted to gather the glass, the tray, the cloth, every small proof of her failure, and retreat into the passage servants before the moment grew large enough to crush her. But Adrian's words had pinned the hall in place, and for the first time in her life, the shame did not seem to belong entirely to her. Derek cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, I was meant only to protect the dignity of the ceremony." Adrian's silver gaze did not move. "By humiliating a servant who can barely stand." A soft gasp traveled through the nobles. Marissa's fingers tightened around her pearl fan, but she recovered quickly, stepping into the silence with the careful grace of someone used to being admired. "The captain may have spoken harshly, but surely your Majesty understands the importance of order. Tonight is not an ordinary feast. Every house has brought its finest daughters. Every pack awaits your choice. We only wish to prevent an embarrassment." Clara felt those words turn toward her like cold weather. An embarrassment. Not a girl. Not a sister. Not someone who had stayed awake beside a sick child and counted medicine drops by candlelight. Just a stain on a polished floor. She lowered her eyes, trying to steady her breathing the way she had taught Caleb during fever chills. In for 4 counts, hold for 2, out for 4. But her body will not obey. Her hands shook so badly that the metal tray whispered against the marble. Adrian heard it. Of course he did. Wolves like him heard everything. The weak hinge of a door, the tremble inside a lie, the quiet break in a voice too tired to beg. His gaze dropped to her fingers. Clara curled them into her apron, hiding the red marks left by years of work and one long week of too much soap, too little sleep, and too many orders given by people who never learned her name. "What is your name?" Adrian asked. For a moment, Clara did not understand that the king was speaking to her. No one in that hall asked servants unless questions they already knew the answer would hurt. She looked up carefully. "Clara Whitmore, Your Majesty." Her voice was faint, but in the silent hall it carried. Something moved through Adrian's expression, not surprise exactly, but recognition without memory, like a song heard once in childhood and found again in a storm. "How many hours have you served today, Clara Whitmore?" Panic rose fast. Behind Adrian, the head steward stood pale near the banquet doors. If she told the truth, someone would pay for it, and it would probably be her. "I do not know, Your Majesty." Marissa gave a delicate laugh. "How convenient." Adrian finally turned his eyes to her, and the laugh died unfinished. "I did not ask you." The words were calm. That made them worse. Clara's knees weakened again, but before she could fall, Adrian stepped down from the dais. Then another step. The crowd parted without being told. He stopped beside the small piece of bread hidden near the curtain, and when he looked back at her, the entire palace seemed to understand that the night had shifted. Adrian bent and picked up the small piece of bread as if it were not a scrap from a servant's table, but a clue left behind by a kingdom that had forgotten how to be kind. It sat in his gloved palm, plain and hard at the edges, wrapped in a corner of clean cloth. Clara's heart tightened. That was Caleb's breakfast. She had saved it from her own plate because the infirmary broth was thin, and her brother always pretended not to be hungry when she came to visit. "This is yours?" Adrian asked. Clara swallowed. Every eye in the hall was on the bread now, and somehow that felt worse than when they had laughed at her sleeping on the floor. "Yes, Your Majesty, you were saving it." It was not a question, but Clara nodded anyway. "For my brother." A murmur passed through the room, softer this time, less amused. Adrian's gaze stayed on her face. "Where is he?" "The infirmary, Your Majesty, North Wing. He has had a fever for 6 days." The words slipped out before fear could stop them. The head steward closed his eyes as if she had just broken something valuable. Marissa tilted her chin, trying to reclaim control of the room. "Many servants have relatives, Your Majesty. It is unfortunate, but palace matters cannot bend around every personal hardship." Adrian didn't look at her. "Who assigned Clara Whitmore to banquet service after 3 nights in the infirmary?" No one answered. The silence became its own confession. Clara felt panic rose again, sharper than dizziness. "Please, Your Majesty, I was allowed to visit only after my duties. No one forced me." It was a foolish lie, a gentle lie, the kind Omegas told when they knew the truth would not save them, only anger those above them. Adrian studied her, and for one strange second, Clara felt as if he could see the shape of every burden she had hidden beneath her gray dress and lowered eyes. "You are protecting the people who fail you," he said quietly. Clara's throat closed. She wanted to deny it, but the words would not come. Derek shifted near the dais, his boots scraping the marble. "Your Majesty, with respect, the Maid is making this appear worse than it is. Palace staff exaggerate when they want pity." Clara flinched at the accusation, but Adrian's hand closed around the wrapped bread, not enough to crush it, enough to show he had heard. "Pity is what the comfortable call mercy when they do not wish to give it." The hall went still again. Far above them, the chandeliers flickered, casting silver light across Adrian's face. He turned to the royal healer standing near the side doors, an older woman in blue robes who had watched everything with troubled eyes. "Bring the boy warm food, clean blankets, and a private room with a window that closes. Now." The healer bowed at once and hurried away. Clara stared after her, stunned so deeply she forgot to breathe. Caleb will be warm. Caleb would eat. Caleb would not have to smile through chattering teeth and pretend the cold did not matter. Her eyes burned. But she forced the tears back. Not here, not in front of them. Adrian stepped closer, his voice lowered so only the first rows could hear. "And Clara Whitmore is finished serving tonight." Marissa's perfect face tightened. Derek opened his mouth as if to object. Clara did too, but for a different reason. If she stopped working, she would owe more. If she owed more, someone would remember. Someone always did. She reached for the tray again, because work was the only shield she knew how to hold. Her fingers shook. The tray slipped. A crystal cup tipped, rolled, and struck the marble with a clear ringing sound that carried through the hall like a warning. The cup did not break, but the sound it made seemed to strike something hidden beneath the floor, beneath the throne, beneath the skin of every wolf in the hall. Clara froze with one hand still reaching towards it. For a heartbeat, she was only aware of small things. The cool air against her damp face, the rough seam inside her sleeve, the ache in her shoulders from carrying trays through corridors longer than city blocks. Then the room shifted, not with movement, but with scent. Adrian felt it first. It rose so faintly that no ordinary wolf would have noticed it beneath the roses, wine, candle smoke, and polished silver. Lavender after rain, clean linen warmed by morning sun, moonlight over quiet water. It came from Clara, fragile and almost buried beneath exhaustion, but unmistakable. His wolf, silent for years in matters of the heart, lifted its head inside him. Mine. Adrian did not move at once. He had faced rebellions without blinking. He had stood before councils that wanted his crown and armies that wanted his borders. But this small Omega maid, trembling over a fallen cup as if the world might end because she had dropped one more thing, stopped him more completely than any challenge ever had. Clara did not understand why his expression had changed. She only saw the hall watching her again, waiting for another mistake. Her fingers closed around the cup, and she tried to set it back on the tray, but her strength failed in a quiet, humiliating way. The tray tilted. Derek sobbed loudly, as if her weakness had personally offended him. "Enough," he asserted, stepping forward. "She needs to be taken out before she embarrasses the palace further." Clara's breath caught. Taken out meant the servant office, the steward's ledger, a mark beside her name. Debt increased, access revoked. Caleb alone in the north wing, asking why she didn't come. She shook her head before she could stop herself. "Please," she whispered. "I can finish. I can still work." The words were so small that most of the room missed them. Adrian didn't. His jaw tightened, not in anger at her, but at a world that had trained her to beg for the right to collapse quietly. Derek reached for her shoulder, not roughly, not yet, but with the careless entitlement of someone who had never been told no by anyone beneath him. Clara saw his hand coming and braced herself for the shame of being lifted like furniture in front of people who would forget her face by breakfast. He never touched her. Adrian was there before the distance between them could close. No one saw him across the few feet of marble. One moment he stood beside the dais, and the next, his black coat blocked Clara from the hall, from Derek, from every amused stare that had fed on her pain. The air changed with him there, colder at the edges, safer at the center. Derek stopped so suddenly, his hand hovered uselessly in the space between them. Adrian looked at that hand, then at Derek's face. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Step back." Derek obeyed before pride could argue. Clara looked up, stunned, and saw the king standing close enough that the shadow of his coat fell over her like shelter. For the first time all night, no one was looking at her as a servant. They were looking at her because the Alpha King had placed himself between her and the room. For a moment, Clara forgot the cold floor beneath her knees. She forgot the chandelier light, the whispers, even the dull ache in her body. All she knew was the black wall of Adrian Blackwood's coat between her and the room, and the impossible quiet that followed his command. Derek stood a few feet away, his face drained of confidence. He had stepped back because the king had told him to, but humiliation burned in his eyes, and pride made foolish men reach for what wisdom would leave untouched. "Your Majesty," Derek said carefully, "I only meant to wake her." Clara lowered her gaze, shame tightening around her throat. Wake her up. As if she had been a problem to solve, an object misplaced beneath the royal curtain, as if exhaustion were disrespected instead of surrender. Adrian turned his head slightly, just enough for his silver eyes to settle on Derek. The entire hall seemed to lean away from that look. "She was not disturbing the ceremony," he said. "You were." The words were quiet, but they carried to the farthest marble arch. A few nobles dropped their eyes. Someone in the back coughed once and fell silent. Marissa's lips parted, but no sound came out. Clara's fingers tightened around the tray in her lap. She did not understand this. Kings did not defend maids. Alphas did not stand between omegas and judgment. In every story she had ever heard, power looked down. It did not kneel close enough to notice shaking hands. But Adrian did notice. He looked at her again, and this time the coldness in his face softened by a fraction. "Can you stand?" he asked. No one had asked her that all night. Clara tried to answer, but her voice caught. She nodded, because nodding was easier than admitting the truth. Adrian saw the lie before she finished it. He removed the heavy black cloak from his shoulders and lowered it around her, careful, measured, giving her space even while shielding her from every stare in the hall. Warmth settled over her like the first safe thing she had felt in years. The scent of pine, frost, and rain clung to the fabric. Her wolf, quiet and small inside her, stirred with a fragile sound that felt almost like recognition. Clara froze. Adrian froze too. The bond moves between them, invisible but bright, like moonlight slipping beneath a locked door. He heard her heartbeat change. She saw his hand still in the air near the edge of the cloak, as if he was afraid one wrong movement might frighten her. Derek took one step forward, panic and embarrassment making him reckless. "Your Majesty, she cannot remain here covered in the royal cloak. The guests will misunderstand." Adrian didn't look away from Clara. His voice dropped lower, calm enough to be terrifying, gentle enough to make her chest ache. "Wake her again, and die." The hall went utterly still, not because of the threat alone, but because of the way he said it. Not as anger, not as performance, but as law. Clara stared up at him, stunned beneath the weight of his cloak. Adrian finally faced the room, and every noble who had laughed at her moments before looked as if they wished the marble would open and hide them. "This banquet is over," he said. "The presentation of Luna candidates is suspended." Marissa went pale. "Your Majesty, surely you do not mean because of one servant." Adrian's eyes returned to Clara, and the word servant seemed to fade before it reached him. "No," he said, "because this palace has forgotten the difference between rank and worth." The words did not echo, yet they seemed to remain in the air long after Adrian spoke them. Rank and value. Clara had heard those things treated as the same for so long that the difference felt almost dangerous. Beneath the royal cloak, her hands curled into the soft black fabric, not because she wanted to keep it, but because some frightened part of her did not know what to do with warmth given freely. Around her, the nobles stood trapped inside their own silence. The same mouths that had laughed at her now pressed shut. The same eyes that had looked through her now followed every breath she took, searching for the secret that could make a king lower his cloak around a maid. Adrian turned to the head steward, who looked as though the marble floor had become thin beneath his polished shoes. "Bring me the staff ledger." The steward bowed too quickly. "Your Majesty, perhaps after the guests have retired." "Now, one word." The steward fled. Marissa recovered enough to step forward, her silver gown whispering across the floor. "Your Majesty, the royal houses have traveled from more than 200 miles away for this honor. Suspending the presentation over a misunderstanding may create concern." Adrian looked at her then, fully, and Clara watched Marissa realize that beauty could open doors, but it could not soften a closed judgment. "Then let them be concerned," he said. "A kingdom that cannot protect the weakest person in the room has no right to celebrate power." No one moved. Then the royal healer returned through the side doors, breathing hard from the rush, her blue robes gathered in one hand. She bowed low. "The boy is being moved, Your Majesty. Clean blankets, warm broth, and fever medicine have been provided. His name is Caleb Whitmore." Clara's breath broke. She tried to hide it, but Adrian heard. His gaze found her again, steady and quiet. He asked for his sister, the healer added gently. That was the sentence that nearly undid her. Not the laughter, not the shame, not even the king's cloak around her shoulders. Caleb had asked for her, and for the first time in days, someone with power had listened. Clara pressed her lips together, but a tear slipped down anyway, bright against the red mark on her cheek. She wiped it away fast, embarrassed, but Adrian's expression shifted again, colder toward the room, softer toward her. The steward returned with a thick leather ledger clutched against his chest. Adrian opened it himself. Pages groaned beneath his fingers. Names, hours, debts, deductions for uniforms, candles, medicine, broken dishes, late meals. Every small chain written neatly in ink. He stopped at Clara's name. His eyes moved down the page. One shift became two became three. Banquet service, laundry, night corridor cleaning, infirmary debt, missed meal credits. The longer he read, the quieter the room became. At last, Adrian closed the book. Clara Whitmore has worked 36 hours in 3 days and was charged for the medicine used to keep her brother alive. Marissa looked away. Derek stared at the floor. Clara felt the truth stand beside her like something taller than shame. Adrian placed the ledger in the steward's trembling hands. All servant debts are frozen until reviewed. Any punishment tied to tonight is erased. Then he looked at Clara. And you will see your brother. She tried to stand on her own, because accepting help in front of everyone felt impossible. But the room tilted again, softer this time, like sleep reaching for her with both hands. Adrian stepped closer, not touching until she gave the smallest nod. Then he lifted her carefully into his arms, as if the entire hall had become less important than the tired Omega beneath his cloak. Clara woke to warmth, not laughter. For a moment, she thought she had dreamed the banquet, the marble floor, the cruel smiles, the impossible weight of the royal cloak around her shoulders. Then she opened her eyes and saw the infirmary window glowing with early morning light. Caleb slept in the bed beside her, tucked beneath clean blankets, his cheeks less pale than they had been the night before. A bowl of broth rested on the table, still steaming. Fresh medicine sat beside it in a glass vial marked with the royal seal. Clara's breath trembled. He was safe. That was the first miracle. The second stood near the window, silent and dark against the sunrise. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood had not left. His coat was gone, still draped over Clara like a promise no one had dared take back. He turned when she stirred, and for the first time she saw how tired he looked beneath all that power, as if ruling had taught him to expect fear from every room he entered, but not trust. Clara tried to sit up. "Your Majesty, I should return your cloak. Keep it until you are warm," Adrian said. His voice was low, but there was no command in it, only care. Clara looked down, and that was when she saw the mark on her wrist. A thin silver crescent shimmered beneath her skin, faint as moonlight on water. Her wolf stirs softly inside her, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. Adrian saw her notice it. He didn't step closer. He waited, giving her the choice the world had so often denied her. "What is it?" she whispered, though some deep part of her already knew. Adrian's silver eyes softened. A bond older than crowns. "It does not make you less free, Clara. It only tells me what my soul recognized before my mind understood. Tears blurred her vision, but this time she did not wipe them away in shame. From the doorway came a sound, soft at first, then growing. Servants, healers, guards, and nobles stood in the hallway outside the infirmary, not laughing now, not pointing. One by one, they lower their heads, not to a maid beneath a throne, but to Clara Whitmore, the Omega the moon had chosen while the palace was too proud to see her. Adrian looked at them once, then back at her. "Rest," he said. "When you wake, no one in this palace will forget your name again." And Clara, who had spent years believing kindness had to stay quiet to survive, finally closed her eyes knowing that gentleness had not made her weak. It had led the king straight to her. And maybe that is the heart of this story. Sometimes the world mistakes exhaustion for failure, silence for weakness, and kindness for something easy to ignore. But a person's worth is not measured by rank, money, beauty, or how loudly others praise them. It is measured in the quiet choices no one applauds, the love given when no one is watching, and the dignity kept even when others try to take it away. In my opinion, Clara's strength was never in proving herself to cruel people. Her strength was in determination to become cruel herself. If this story touches you, tell me in the comments what you think true strength looks like. And if you believe stories like this still matter, where love protects the overlooked and destiny remembers the forgotten, then subscribe and stay with us for the next journey beneath the moon.